Hi guys, welcome to my second video. Today I'm going to be doing a tag video. I'm going to be doing the Playing With Your Emotions tag, which was created by Padfoot and Prongs 07. I'm going to leave a link to her video channel below. You should definitely go check her out. And the first emotion is happy, and the book that I chose is Cecelia Ahern, Where a Rainbow's End. This book, it makes me happy because it reminds me of being 14 and believing in everything to do with love. It's a love story spanning 50 years and the characters are Rosie and Alex, and the book is actually written in the style of emails and letters between them from when they're about 4 till 50. And it's got a happy ending, they live happily ever after, and it's just a story that gives you hope that even if the person you love drifts away from you, takes a different life path for a while, that in the end, if you're meant to be together, then you will find a way. And I think for most people that is a nice notion, especially when you're 14 and you have that person that you really like. The next emotion is sad, and the book I chose is The Book Thief by Markus Zusak. I chose this book because it was the first book, apart from the Harry Potter books, that's ever made me properly cry. There is a really sad part in this book, and if you've read it, you know which bit I'm on about. I don't think it's just that part though, I think it's just the subject matter that this book talks about and is set during. I was a bit apprehensive when I first started reading, that the fact that it was narrated by Death, but I think it just adds such a unique and important aspect to the book that makes it so brilliant. It's one of my favourite books. Next emotion is angry. This book doesn't make me angry as a whole. There is just a certain part in this book that really makes my blood boil. It's One Day by David Nicholls. I was so angry, and if you've read this book you probably know which bit I'm on about. If you don't, leave a comment and I'll inbox you the bit because I don't want to ruin it for anyone. I was so angry with this author that I put the book down, and I don't think I picked it up for another day because I loved these characters. I don't always get invested in characters in books. They just feel too one-dimensional to me. They don't jump out the page, but Emma and Dexter definitely did. And when what happened, I was just in shock. I was so angry, I was so upset that I didn't know what to do. I was just like, no, won't be reading that book for the next couple of hours. One of my favourite books, as I said, but I didn't like David Nicholls for a few hours after reading that part. The next emotion is nostalgic, and I'm not going to choose the obvious answer to this question. I'm going to pick something that got me into reading. I'm going to choose Burley Doherty's The Sailing Ship Tree. I first got this book out of the library when I was about 6 or 7. It was one of the first proper books that I read along with The Secret Garden. I just remember being completely taken into another world, into this Victorian world of Walter and Dorothy. They have a tree where they live, and it's a sycamore tree, I think, and if they sit in the sycamore tree they can see all of the ships leaving the dock. When I was younger I really loved history, I loved the Victorian times, I loved anything to do with the past, and I think this book, that's why I loved this book so much, and probably why I loved The Secret Garden so much as well, because it was just like being transported back in time. And I haven't reread this book, I just brought this because I needed a copy of it, but every time I look at it I just remember being 7 and this book being the most amazing thing that I'd ever come across in the whole wide world. Next emotion is scared. I don't read horror. I don't like horror, I don't watch horror films, I don't watch scary programmes. I think the most scariest book I've read was The Body by Stephen King, and I think that's one of his mild ones. That's only because the movie Stand By Me was based on it. So I decided to choose a book that scares me for a different reason, and it would be Literature, Criticism and Theory by Bennett and Royal. This is a university book from my first and second year. I had to do a couple of essays where I had to reference this book. I left doing one of the essays till quite late, and I was still doing it at 4 o'clock in the morning the day before the deadline, and just looking at this book reminds me of that module and that essay, and panicking and not understanding certain parts of theories to do with Lacan and Freud. It's an interesting book, it's got some really interesting thoughts on the death of the author in here and identity and other things, but it's just looking at it, it makes me think about thinking that I failed and that I should have at least had 2 drafts of my essay and not 1 and given that in. So this book scares me because it reminds me of near failure, I think. Emotion is surprised, and I had quite a few candidates for this section. I was going to choose Wuthering Heights because I'm not a huge fan of classics. Never really have been, but I had to read Wuthering Heights for a module last year and it really surprised me. I really did enjoy it. But then I remembered this book and I was like, no, this book has to be for that emotion, and it is Flowers for Algernon by Daniel Keyes. I've never really read much proper science fiction. I'm more fantasy, so I've read sci-fi fantasy but never pure science fiction, and this book blew me away. It was brought for me by a friend who was like, you have to read this book, it is one of the most amazing books, and I agree with him. The reason I was surprised is because it's not just a story, it makes you think, it makes you ask yourself questions, it makes you ask questions about what it is to be human and how you perceive other people and how you perceive yourself, and whether intelligence is like the core thing to being human. Should you want to be of the highest intelligence, and how you judge people who are intelligent who aren't. I just think it's a really amazing book, and I think if a book makes you ask questions, then it's done its job. So I definitely recommend that you read this book. Next emotion was disappointed, and I think I'm going to be in a very small minority when I talk about this book, but I am very disappointed in this book, and that is Perks of Being a Wallflower by Stephen Chbosky. I'm only there in it. I haven't read this for a couple of months now. I've even took it off my currently reading list on Goodreads. The reason I'm disappointed is because it hasn't lived up to the hype for me. It just comes across as pretentious. And I don't know whether it's because I only started reading it because of the hype, and after I'm a teenager that I don't really connect with it. It just feels like the authors crammed every single teenage issue into one book and tried to make it seem plottable, if that's even a word. Yes, teenagers go through the stuff that he is talking about in here, but not all at one go, like this book. It just annoys me. It comes across as pretentious. I don't like the main character. I don't know if he's got Asperger's or autism or anything, and that's not why I don't like him. It's just, it's a bit confusing for me, that character. I don't know. I don't get on with this book as much as I really wanted to like it, but I don't know, there's just something about it that annoys me, really. So I'm going to shut up about it now before I offend someone who really likes it. The next emotion is distressed, and again I chose a university book, and I chose Utopia by Thomas More. This book, and the module that I did surrounding this book, just make me feel like I want to have a breakdown. I remember feeling like I wanted to have a breakdown when I was doing the essay for it, and I remember having a breakdown when reading this book. This book has pages and pages of words, and there's no full stops. I mean, 2 pages for one sentence. How? I know it was written many years ago, before punctuation was like needed, but it gave me a headache. I just couldn't read it, and I had to do a presentation on a certain section of it, and then the lecturer came back and asked me questions that I couldn't answer properly because I hadn't read it properly. It just distresses me. As you can tell by how worked up I'm getting, this book distresses me, so I'm going to put it down. The next emotion was confused. I haven't really got a book that confused me like enough to probably be in this emotion. I've been confused by books when I've read them too fast, such as Mockingjay. I was really confused by the end of that, but then when I went back and reread it, it made a little bit more sense. The same with Harry Potter books. I used to rush through those, and I probably used to miss bits that were quite important, and then when it was mentioned later I'd be like, huh? So when I've gone back and reread them, they've made more sense. But there's not a book that I've ever read the whole way through and just wondered what was going on. There may be books in the future, but not now. Probably a university book I could think of, but not one that I've read through choice. Jesse the Reader, who I'm also going to put in the description box below, he added an emotion called All of the Emotions. And if you can see behind me there, you're probably going to guess what books I'm going to be talking about. I am talking about the Harry Potter series by J.K. Rowling. I could go on for hours and hours about this series and what it means to me, but having watched quite a few of this tag and other videos, it's quite clear that in the booktube community, Harry Potter is all of the emotions for everyone, so I'm not going to go on too much about it, apart from the fact that this is my favourite book and favourite film. Just this series just encapsulates everything about my life in everything. It's just everything to me. If you spoke to anyone that I know, especially my boyfriend, you would know how much Harry Potter is part of my life. So that's it for my second video. I hope you enjoyed the books that I chose. If you've got any comments, then please leave them below. You can like and subscribe if you would like. And the next video you should probably be seeing from me would either be another tag video, because there's a few floating around that I really want to do, or I will be getting around to reviewing the first 2 books in the Mortal Instruments series at some point. I want to get those up at the end of next week at least. So you should definitely look out for those videos, and that's it for today, and I'll see you next time. Bye!